How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that affirmed you as a woman, as equal to man and made in the image of God. A religion that acknowledged your menstrual cycle as a sacred part of creation, your body and sexuality blessed, and validated the feminine voice of God as the most highest, and the care and sustainability of natural resources and non-human life as the highest goal of mankind. How might your life have been different? Welcome to Heretica, her Eco-Feminist Theology educational podcast. A history of Eco-Feminist Theology. How Eco-Feminist Theology came to be. It all begins with what has been dubbed as the Feminist Revolution, a mass movement by women to claim and safeguard their human rights, which essentially contains every other right from social, economic, political, sexual, environmental, religious, and more. Additionally, in some countries, it works against forced marriage, female genital mutilation, period poverty, widow burning, and for some women, the head covering or the burqa is identified as a sign of oppression, although that does not apply to all women, as for some, it's a symbol of the community they belong to and has religious significance. Feminist political action challenges various topics, such as reproductive rights, abortion rights, educational rights, domestic violence, maternity leave, salary equality, voting rights, representation, sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and sexual violence. In our case, I emphasize religious equality within Scripture and within the structures of the Church. The term feminism was coined in 1837 by French utopian philosopher and radical socialist Charles Fourier, who understood so well that the essence of women's emancipation lay in eradicating their legal and economic subordination to women. Hence, feminism is an umbrella term for a number of cultural phenomena related to women's oppressions by men identified to be prevailing in a patriarchal society. We will touch on what patriarchy is later when we explore feminist theology. For now, back to the waves of feminism or change. The history of the feminist movements is divided into 4 waves, which indicate a specific period and its involvement with the media. The first wave of feminism starts mainly in the USA and then in the UK from the 1820s to 1940s, at a time when women have had enough of being treated as second-rate citizens in male-dominated societies. The main focus is on the achieving on the women's suffrage, the exercise of the right to vote. To achieve this, women in the US, as an example, begin to organize themselves. Beginning in 1866, they established the American Equal Rights Association. When that collapses, they replace it with the National Women's Suffrage Association in early 1869, which works to uplift women on a national level. And the American Women's Suffrage Association is formed later in that year, demanding the right to vote of women. Not long after, the two bodies merge into the National American Women's Suffrage Association. In 1916, the National American Women's Suffrage Association closes and the National Women's Party is formed by young feminist Alice Paul, who was also an American Quaker, belonging to the Religious Society of Friends, a historically Protestant Christian denomination. When it comes to the religious beliefs of early feminist women of this time, I will come back to it in a later podcast because there is some interesting information to delve into and contemplate on when it comes to feminism and religion. As a result of the feminist campaign, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution passes in the Senate on June 4, 1919, and Congress gives the right of vote to women in 1920. It should be noted that although through ratification of the 19th Amendment, it fulfilled the principal goal of feminism's first wave, it guaranteed white women the right to vote. Black women and other women of color faced ongoing obstacles until passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, when they also secured suffrage. In Europe, where women also followed in the footsteps of their American sisters, they received the right to vote a bit earlier. Women of most of the European countries, such as Russia, Germany, Austria, and the UK, received the right to vote in 1918 and Belgium in 1919. Three main types of feminism emerged during the first wave, being radical feminism, which sees patriarchy as a system of oppression towards women; liberal feminism, which focuses on women's legal rights and gender equality with a focus on workplace, education, and political rights; and cultural feminism, which emphasizes essential differences between men and women based on biological differences in reproductive capacity. Moving now to the second wave of feminism, which begins in the 1960s and ends after 3 decades in the 1990s, and sexuality and reproductive rights are the dominant issues of the movement. It is during this time that the slogan, "The personal is political," emerges, expressing that the personal experiences of women are rooted in the larger political and social structures and gender inequality, blurring the lines between private and public. It also formed the premises for the creation of feminist consciousness-raising groups whereby women would gather and exchange ideas and generate new knowledge, which formed the basis of future activism. Topics explored included equal education opportunities, equal employment opportunities, equal pay in workplaces, paid maternity leave, birth control and abortion rights, the establishment of adequate childcare facilities, rights of equal access to political and economic positions, and women's and children's safety. It also focuses against domestic violence issues, marital rape issues, sexual harassment and rape, misogyny, official legal inequalities, pornography and prostitution, and the sexual objectification of women's bodies. It also wants to create rape crisis centers and women's shelters, and to bring changes in custody laws and divorce law. Hence, a second wave of feminism extended the domain of feminine politics against sexist ways of men to the private lives of women. And unlike the first wave, the second wave is propelled by both white and non-white women of the West, as well as in developing countries, determining that race, class, and gender oppression are all closely interrelated. Specifically, Marxist and socialist feminism arose arguing that working class women are exploited by both patriarchy and capitalism. Moving now to the third wave feminism, the period in the 1990s to 2000s, and is led by the so-called Generation X's. It brings to light issues of heteronormativity. That is the concept that heterosexuality is a preferred or normal sexual orientation, and challenges it. It starts through the surging of the new post-colonial world that's happening in or relating to the period after the end of colonial and imperial rule. That's control of a country by another country. And a neoliberal world order, an ideology and policy model that emphasizes the value of free market competition. Ideologies that prevail are, in addition to cultural feminism, black feminism, which focuses on the oppression of black women, and postmodern feminism, which rejects essentialism, which is the belief that there is necessarily an inherent difference between men and women. Hence, you may be aware of Simone de Beauvoir and her book The Second Sex, which declared one is not born but becomes a woman after birth, by submitting to language rules which construct our identity. The third wave feminism is often also called power feminism, because during this movement women are strong and rebellious, and working women in various occupations are not subjected to a sexist patriarchy. It supports reproductive rights and fights against sexual violence and sexual harassment in workplace, rape and gang rape, and unfair maternity leave policies. It is global because women are of many colors, ethnicities, nationalities, religions, and cultural backgrounds, and celebrates sexuality in a positive way. It is also during this period of time that feminist scholars started to publish new literature that helped readers better understand feminist theory. One of the pioneering scholars is lawyer and theorist Kimberly Crenshaw, who developed intersectionality in 1989. Intersectional feminism takes into account the many different ways each woman experiences discrimination, which can overlap meaning in more ways than one, and can include sex, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, class, ability, gender, and more. Now we come to the last wave, the fourth wave of feminism, led by millennials and Generation Z. It starts in 2012 and is based on online technology and originated from social networking sites such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but also blogging. During this movement, social justice campaigns have erupted on social media such as #2 and Time's Up movements, girl boss feminism, dubbed #feminism. In this movement, the social media becomes a real catalyst to fight against women's harassment, professional discrimination, media sexism, and gender shaming. It tries to empower men, women, and transgender people, promoting the acceptance of all possible bodies, #body positivity. So that's a bit of an overview of the four waves. And now entering what's relevant to this podcast, when and why does feminist theology develop, and consequently eco-feminist theology? So during the first wave, we meet Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who at the formation of the National American Woman Suffrage Association in 1890, she was elected president and was a very popular suffragist. Stanton, though, was dissatisfied with the way women were oppressed in society, and she blamed religion, particularly the Bible, for this inequality, in that many individuals throughout history have used the Bible to justify unequal and unfair treatment of women. Largely because of corrupt translations and misogynistic interpretations of the Bible, women have been viewed as subservient to men. Before moving on further with Stanton's impact on feminist theology, I would like to share a few ideas about what we mean by patriarchy drawn from Hellenic or Greek influences. One of the ways life on earth is viewed is dividing time into two phases, one matriarchy and the other patriarchy. In accordance with matriarchal studies pioneer Heidi Goettner-Abendroth in Matriarchal Studies on indigenous cultures across the globe, the definition of matriarchy is derived from the Greek word archi, which means beginning. In light thereof, the fact that biologically mothers engender the beginning of time and hence human culture, matriarchy means the mothers from the beginning. Goettner-Abendroth makes a very important distinction. Matriarchy isn't the opposite of patriarchy, in that its purpose was to oppress men. Matriarchies are true gender egalitarian societies. This applies to the social contribution of both sexes, and even though women are at the center, this principle governs the social functioning and freedom of both sexes. Matriarchal societies should emphatically not be regarded as mirror images of patriarchal ones, with dominating women instead of patriarchies dominating men, as they have never needed patriarchy's hierarchical structures. One example of this is ancient Minoan Crete, which I will explore the religious goddess-based practices in a future podcast. The shift to patriarchy has been aligned with a Greek poem called Theogony, written by Hesiod, describing the origins of the cosmos and the interconnected genealogy of the Olympian Greek gods, making it one of the longest surviving works of Greek mythology, which describes the creation of the world out of chaos, that's void or chasm. Theogonies are dated around the 9th and 8th centuries BC, following the Hellenic invasions of Greece. According to historians, one invader group known as the Dorians brought with them their masculine sky gods, and gradually religious practice began to favor male gods, changing the Mediterranean people's religious rituals, which up to the 3rd millennium seem to have been matriarchal worshippers of an Earth Mother goddess. The new people amalgamated with the old and produced a society in which an Indo-European language with traces of their old language predominated. This resulted in a religion which was not a blend of the two, but an unbalanced combination whereby the male aspects of the new religion gained dominance over the female aspects of the old. Hesiod's Theogony thus represents the change in religious and gender balances which were taking place. While in the outset Hesiod's cosmogony poem gives the female deities the role of shaping the cosmos through parthenogenesis or divine birth, ultimately the poem culminates into Zeus's reign as an Olympian god and the stability of a male sovereign. This builds up to Zeus mimicking the parthenogenetic abilities of the goddess when he gives birth to Athena himself from his head. Stories of male gods producing progeny and imitating the goddess is a schism. The female priesthoods of the local goddesses in mainland Greece, where they practiced the Eleusinian fertility-based mysteries as one example, continue to survive under the domination of the one great god Zeus, as long as their power is less than Zeus. Gradually, though, women become more and more secluded from social life, and the primary duties become taking care of the household chores and bearing children without any religious rights to property or on their own children. During the classical era in Greece, the sexual politics and misogyny at the time targets women's bodies. Hippocrates and Aristotle were in agreement that menstrual bodies were inferior to the male, considered mutilated males and monsters, deviated from the generic human type. Together with the emergence of Christianity and the reforms, this dissolves female priesthoods permanently, and the taboos created around menstruation are incorporated into religious doctrine, deeming women as ritually unclean. Highlighting one way men begin through Christian religion to control woman's body. And the woman's menstruation and its sacredness will also be the focus of a future podcast. So back to Stanton and the first wave of feminism. For this reason, Elizabeth Cady Stanton saw the need to specifically identify areas in the Bible that treated women unfairly in order to depict women in a more positive light. Stanton understood that the public opinion towards women could not shift unless the religious opinion towards women also began to shift. The result was her publication, The Woman's Bible, in 1895, an attempt at righting age-old wrongs and using the Christian Bible as a tool for progress, one that fosters equality and emancipation. To achieve this, Stanton put together a committee of women who were well-versed in biblical scholarship, women who were knowledgeable of Greek and Hebrew, and women who could comment on the English versions of the Bible. The publication of the Woman's Bible alienated many seekers of women's emancipation, particularly key members of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, an organization that Stanton headed before becoming involved in the publication of the Woman's Bible. These women felt that the women's suffrage movement should avoid using religious material or criticizing the Bible because of the potentially controversial effects. In fact, almost all of the women connected to the suffrage, refused to participate in creating the new Bible. And Stanton gradually alienated herself from the organization. So once again, we will return to the background history of the publication of this book, as there is a narrative around the occult origins of the feminist movement generated by the first wave, and this will provide a great way to explore feminist theology and occult practices. Are they okay or not? That's for another time, another exciting topic. Now going into the second wave of feminism. It was during the second wave in the 1960s that feminist inquiry finally entered general academic discourse. Programs in feminist and women's studies and eventually gender studies began to be created, what feminist inquiry achieved was a relocation of its focus on the distinctive experience of women, that is, seeing women rather than men in center stage, as both subject matter of and creators of knowledge. Consequently, this led to the interpretation of the biblical text as well, initially by focusing on the women in the Bible, then to accepting the historical facts and teachings of the Bible partially and with reservations, to even instances of its complete rejection. The realization that women also experience their lives according to race, class, age, sexual orientation, which later became known as intersectionality during the third wave, the theological interpretations began to claim the full humanity for women with this in mind, and led in the third wave to cross-cultural biblical studies with approaches like African, Asian, indigenous, Latina, queer, and womanist. The aim was radical equality and liberation from a patriarchal Bible and religion, and it continues to be so. Exploring now the revival of goddess worship that culminated more so in the third wave, women were further interested in exploring spiritualities of life as a result of being disenchanted from Christian spirituality. So the goddess movement, also known as goddess feminism, and more recently as the divine feminine, began transfixing the reality by making God in their own image. This compelling phenomenon, a novel, non-centralized religious current of neo-pagan origin that worships the divine as feminine, emerged. Due to the deliberate absence of a fixed religious doctrine, the practices of goddess followers are individualistic and greatly vary, but although of diverse nature, they are bound by one common element, an unequivocal devotion to the sacred feminine. So again, here we will visit the so-called occult origins or interconnections with feminism and its spiritual movement, and we will go further into the blend in the next podcast, as it becomes important to be able to distinguish between what can be malignant occult practices and what can be related to traditional Christian biblical tradition. Yet one relevant characteristic of this movement is the sacredness of nature. Nature is perceived as female, and as the mother goddess herself, Mother Earth therefore is a central goddess in the goddess movement's pantheon, but also independent of it, known as ecofeminism. A prevalent belief is that there is an intrinsic connection between women and nature, and both were subjugated out of fear of their inherent and destructive power. Historically, spiritual traditions that honored nature venerated the feminine. Goddess feminists call for respect for both the earth and women. Specifically, ecofeminism was coined by French feminist Françoise de Beaune in 1974. Ecofeminism, or ecological feminism, examines the interconnectedness between the domination of women and the domination of nature on both a cultural symbolic level and a socio-economic level, and seeks worldviews to liberate and heal these interconnected dominations by understanding their etiology and enforcement. The link between women and nature in the patriarchal dualistic culture of female-male, mind-body and nature culture parallels women and nature as existing to serve the needs, wants and desires of men, thus leaving women and nature as having little or no meaning independent to men. It has also organized itself in such a way that patriarchy dominates and distracts the earth and its living creatures for profit over people, natural resources, and life quality. When brought into the sphere of feminist theology, the social patterns developed reveal a system of domination of women rooted in a larger patriarchal hierarchical system of priestly and warrior king control, whereby ideological tools were constructed as a reflection of the will of the god or gods, and creation stories of the ancient Near East and classical Athens culminating into Hebrew and Greek thought, and later reigning in Christianity, begin with the presupposition of patriarchal dualism as the foundational nature of all things, by conquering the old mother, who in matriarchal social-cultural reality created the cosmos. Eco-Feminist theology challenges these patriarchal and dualistic mind constructs over the female body, which in Western theological thought creates existential distortion for women in terms of their relation to themselves and God, and consequently to Mother Earth and the cosmos as a whole. Therefore, to challenge the structures of patriarchal domination requires ecological insights within feminist theological thought, and to question the human nature and human-divine relationship in non-dualistic terms. Ecofeminism reminds us that we are here to live in life-giving harmony with the whole of the Earth community, and that our own self-reflective consciousness, grounded in our intuitive knowing, which is our journey through time and space, guides us to recollect through our primordial memory how once we lived in oneness. That is aware of our mortal and immortal nature and is part of and interdependent upon ecological consciousness in what is known as matriarchal or goddess-worshipping cultures. In these egalitarian cultures, God, humans, and non-humans co-created, and this gave humans a will to live. In the context of, therefore, of understanding oneself, feminist theology is reframing God as the goddess. This brings about the right balance between justice and sustainability to create communities that are mutually and equally flourishing. An eco-feminist approach to challenging patriarchal hierarchies and religious narratives unmasks the interconnections between all systems of oppression, rethinks what it means to be human, and sees the intersectional and diverse experiences of women and that of other oppressed groups and seeks to bring them into equity. This highlights how ecofeminism confronts patriarchal oppression and leads to holistic transformation, restoring gender equality in theological work. Finally, before completing this chat, some of the feminist approaches to theology which can inspire you and become food for thought until next time. Women are seeking a God that is made in a woman's image as well. They are seeking women's experiences of God. They are questioning why God is referred to as a father, Lord, or master. Where is the mother? Why is God understood more through his maleness than through his humanness? Why is the male superior to the female? Why does churches' organizational structures enshrine rather than challenge societal arrangements and stereotypes of female, male roles and requires women to adhere to its beliefs? Why does a religion venerate Mary holding up her virginal motherhood or her motherly virginity as an ideal, if possible, for flesh and blood women to attain? Feminist theologians are asking, can such be the true will of a living God? Their resounding no is turning theology on its head. Thank you. Until next time.